So welcome everybody. I'm glad you come to join us for the call, and just like to start by inviting you to share a bit about yourself and what interests you in narrative coaching.
I will go first.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl.
I'm Cheryl Cooley. I am based in Virginia, Northern Virginia.
Mhm.
Um, I think I am interested in narrative coaching because I'm a narrative expert.
Excellent.
And I also have done coaching, and I feel like there's a way to leverage all the elements of narrative in that process.
All right, great. And what is your expertise in story? What have you studied that you really appreciate?
I'm sorry, the question is, what is my expertise in story?
Yeah, like particularly like what interests you? I mean, what drew you to story, and what do you study?
I am also a poet and a playwright, so
Okay,
that is the connection to story. I've
excellent.
also used it quite a bit in my job roles, no matter what the title is. That's
Okay,
seems to be what I come back to.
all right.
Um, and aside from that, having two parents who are both natural storytellers.
Okay. You-
One of them does it for entertainment, the other's just a liar.
But I'm probably a pretty good one at that then.
Yeah, pretty
Oh,
good.
excellent. Thanks, Cheryl. Hmm. And Sue's from Southwest Wales. Oh, cool. Wonderful. And Julia, welcome.
Hello?
Is this Julia?
Yes, I'm trying to get my, sorry about that. Hello,
You
everyone.
were in a very dark room.
No, I was like, why is my camera not on?
Yeah, well, welcome.
Thank you.
And where are you coming from today?
I'm, I'm in Eureka, California. It's up on the coast.
On the coast. Yeah. I've done a lot of hiking on the Lost Coast, and so the whole,
The
um,
redneck.
yeah, love it up that way.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, wonderful. And Susan, how about you? Where are you today?
David, yeah, I'm calling in from South Australia in the Claren Vale wine region.
Oh,
Got two
darn.
Aussie wine.
Yeah, wonderful. And Jessica,
Hi there, I'm Jess. I am in Sydney, Australia.
excellent. And Susan, we've met before. Where
Yeah,
did you,
I've actually done narrative coaching and ID.
yes.
Uh,
Oh,
and
yes.
so, yeah, so I've actually got a fair bit of an idea of what narrative coaching is, and it changed my world. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I just have been considering doing it again just to refresh
Okay.
my mind. I have been coaching for a while, but more recently not because my son's had a lot of anxiety. So I've been homeschooling and out of
Mm,
it, and I've lost a lot of confidence. And yeah, so I'm here just to see, do
okay.
I want to, is
All
it the
right.
right thing to get my head back into this?
All right. All right. Somebody's okay. Got it. And Renee, welcome. And you're from down Victoria Way.
Yeah, apologies for being a little bit late.
No worries. I recognize the name of your country. I spent 5 years running a program for Aboriginal leaders in Southwest in Victoria. So yeah,
Oh, fantastic.
yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah. And Chad, so what brought you to Ecuador?
I was brought here to teach what I do at a wellness retreat.
Okay.
And the last day we were here, we were in this little town called Baños, Ecuador, which is where this is where I am right now. It's in the Andes Mountains. And the last day they all drove 3 hours back to the airport to go home, and I told them just to leave me here.
Okay.
And
All right.
so yeah, so I'm living here now.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. Um, all right. So, let's see. So I've got a number of slides, and I'm just curious about what you would most like to know about narrative coaching, so I can maybe pick out which slides might be useful. Like, what are you curious about, or what would be helpful for you to know? Do you have any sense at all, or you're just here, what do you think?
I just thought it sounded like a great way to spend a Thursday evening.
Excellent.
Now I'm curious because I've read some things on narrative therapy. I just went through some programs certifying as a spiritual coach,
Uh-huh.
but my background prior to going on this journey I've been on this last year, which is part of why I stayed in Ecuador, has taken me out of doing what I did for years, which my company is sorry. My company is called the Story Catcher. So I worked with businesses and entrepreneurs, and I helped them uncover the stories underneath their stories. But I was doing it to help them connect more deeply with people they
Okay.
were marketing to. And as I did it, people started telling me it felt very therapeutic. I wasn't giving advice or anything, but they were opening up. They were uncovering things they hadn't shared with other people. And I just realized I wanted to do something that dealt more with storytelling and the stories we tell ourselves,
Okay.
and helping people write the story they want instead of
Mhm.
just using it as a marketing tool to grow a
Okay.
business. I wanted
Okay.
something more meaningful.
Great. Hmm. Hmm.
I would just add, I joined because I listened to a podcast you were on, and then that made me listen to another video where you mentioned your approach, and I I've had some training through kind of the ICF, and I'm bumping into some things around how to explore, especially in the opening connection
Mhm.
with when you're working with someone, is that it often leads into it's often a story of their day, but connects to something more meaningful throughout. And I feel like perhaps what you're offering is something of that, how
Yep.
to pull that connection through. And I feel like that's
Mhm.
it's not a rigid, perhaps like these are the steps you take to
Yeah.
guide a conversation. So I was attracted to that and be interested in hearing a little more about that philosophy.
Okay. I've got a couple of slides that will help you with that, and I just did a demo for a couple of hours ago for a couple of research projects, and we were commenting about the way it began. It felt so different for this person than all the other coaching they've ever done before. So, yeah. Anybody else have anything specific you'd like right now? Otherwise, I can show you a couple of pictures and then we can talk to those. Okay. There we go. There we go. Yeah. So, just I'd like to start just with a little bit about what makes this work kind of unique. And so, one of the first ones is that we spend a lot of the beginning of the course us reflecting on our own stories and how we show up to people and um, kind of what we're bringing to this work, and also what role we imagine ourselves playing as a coach. So oftentimes coaches get caught up, to get worried about, am I doing the right thing, or is this the right approach? And they get really thinking about the next question. And sooner or later, they end up sort of getting really quite caught up in the conversation. And so we take a very different way of thinking about our role. It starts with our ability to be present to people and hold that space for them and not over effort so much as a coach. Um, And yeah, there's actually a story that goes with this photo. Um, it sort of speaks to this of going on a long hike to a place I had known as a child up in the mountains in California. And I'm very good at maps, and I've hiked all my life, and everything was going wrong on the hike. And I got to the place where there was supposed to be this beautiful alpine lake, and I couldn't find the creek and the river, and I was very confused. And um, came to this place, and I thought, this has to be here. And it wasn't here. And by then I was exhausted. I'd hurt my knee, and then I took this photo. But what I realized was, again, the power of story. So when I was there as a young person, which would have been 40 years before that, uh, sort of pre-climate change, there were beautiful glaciers on all the very high mountains around this area. And climate change had basically melted all of the glaciers. So there was no more water to feed the lake. There wasn't even a river left. There was just basically a desert at the top of a mountain. And I had been queuing off of these markers looking for water. And this bucolic place I had remembered with great fondness was completely gone. If I had stayed attached to, I have to go find the water, I would have died up there. But I realized I was able to move to a different story, which was without water, the lake is now gone. Um, and then I use that sort of more deep sense of the mountains to find a better way home. So one of the ways we think very much differently about narrative coaching is this is how most coaches are taught. A lot of attention on learning a methodology, on yourself as a coach, even though neither have a lot of effect on outcomes, that's where a lot of people are trained. And they're trained with you, in some forms, you set an agenda, you ask powerful questions, you set goals, you make plans. And for some people, some of the time, that can actually be helpful, but not nearly as often as we think. And in the end, right now, it feels not very useful um, in particular. But we ask people questions, they think about our questions, they answer our questions, we listen to them answering our questions, then we formulate kind of and make sense and meaning out of their answers, and then we use that to ask our next question. Again, all good skills to have, but pretty soon this ends up becoming a merry-go-round that the coach is running. And the reality is that most people don't really understand why they're in coaching. Even if they've got a presenting issue, what they're really there to do is often not even visible to them. So we don't spend a lot of time, we don't set agendas, we don't even ask a lot of questions in the beginning. So we do something that's quite different. Our primary attention is not on ourselves, it's on the other person, the relationship that we're forming, the field, the space that we're working in. That's where we're going to put our attention. Certainly not on ourselves, and certainly not on our method. And our primary role is actually to witness, as the person I was coaching a couple hours ago said, his first comment was, I appreciate that you saw me in ways I couldn't even see myself. And that comes from our attention, where we put our attention. So we are a witness to what the client is trying to do and what the client is trying to see or feel or become. And so when we ask them questions in narrative coaching, sometimes we might ask some like informational questions like, when have you been there before? Or is this your first time as a leader or something to gather some more information? But by and large, most of our questions are helping them inquire into their own experience. So, and Renee, you will appreciate this, that the model is not a purely an individual psychological model. It's based in space, in community, and it's based in what's called a rite of passage, whereby we're helping them not only be witnessed in what they're saying, but how they're saying it. And so we're inquiring into their experience as a narrator. What are you noticing about yourself right now as you're telling me this part of the story? This is what I'm observing. What are you feeling? And so they're narrating their experience, their lived experience, their somatic experience of the story, not just their story as words in their head. And so when we're listening, we have a whole now space to listen to, and we're observing kind of what's happening. We're maybe observing our own reactions to this story. We're observing how the field changes as a result of them telling this. Maybe you notice there's a sadness that's come into the conversation. And so then we're not asking because of what we've heard or think. We're witnessing, this is what I'm hearing you saying. And so what happens is that the client starts to feel more and more agentic or in control of their own conversation, which is great because that's how we want them to feel. Because anything they're going to do as a result of the session, they have to feel came from them. So they own it, they feel it, they sense it. And if we continue to model that across the conversation, the odds are much higher they're going to act on what they did in the session. So on the left are the 5 sort of phases of the model. We show it in different forms, but I just want to put these here as words. Um, and one of the big distinctions about narrative coaching, like I said, is we don't start out by asking lots of questions or making any agendas. We're just actually welcoming a person. What are they noticing right now as they show up? How are they feeling? What are we noticing about them? What seems important to them? And it's really just a non-judgmental, completely accepting, situating themselves in the coaching conversation. And then we're moving around this sort of spiral of asking them questions about what's happening for them, noticing what they're saying, noticing how they're saying it, um, and then sort of bringing them to sort of choice at the end. But along the way, they're going to become a different, something's going to shift in them as they're sort of exploring their story that's going to invite them and prepare them to get much clearer about what they want to do and what it's going to take for them to go do that. So I'm just curious if anything of this so far is making sense to you or bringing up anything for you that you would like to ask. I'll move your picture so I can see you. Yes, Julia.
Uh, it it makes me think about what I had already said, so I don't want to dominate the conversation, but about the idea of starts and how. So in my training, it's been what do you want to focus on? What do you want to gain out of the
Uh-huh.
conversation? What do you want to walk away with? But what you're saying here is it's more about less about this walk away with a tangible 3 step, 3 actions you'll take after this
Yeah.
conversation, and more of unfolding of awareness for the person that's in front of you. How
Yes.
would you describe that?
Yeah, so I'm all about outcomes, but I have done this for so long that it's very rare when a client has any idea what they really want. And they want to play nice and be kind to us and they make up stuff. And those conversations never end anywhere near where they begin. Unless it's something's really obvious or like really thought about this for a long time. And so it just feels like a waste of time for me and for them. And so I'm much more interested in what brought you here and what's on your mind as you show up, or what feels important to you about where we begin. And part of this is because the person, it's not like they're going to a file cabinet. Okay, so Julia's talking to me. I think I'll pull out story number 47 and tell her that one. No, they're engaging with you about what their stories emerging in real time as they're talking to you. And the more present you are to them, the more curious you are about them, the more of the story they're going to tell you. But they're not telling you just from their frontal cortex or from their mind that way. There's parts of them that are showing up in the story that they're not even aware of. So, for example, they could be talking about a story like there's a lot of tension in my family right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to handle that. And then you might notice that every time they talk about this one particular family member, their face goes white. or they slump in their chair. Well, they're not even aware they're doing this. They're just telling their story. But you might say, time out. It's something that seems to be happening here. When you talk about your Uncle Bob, something happens for you. Like, do you notice that in yourself? He goes, well, kind of. And well, tell me about Uncle Bob. Then you discover, oh, there's this whole other thing about Uncle Bob, which wasn't even part of the original story, but somehow it came in and then these new pieces show up. So we're helping them see themselves in the course of their story and the part of them that's telling things that they may not even be aware of. Yeah, and so we want to save our precious time, particularly around shaping outcomes or agreements or steps to the very end when not only are they much clearer about what they really need to be doing, but they've now moved themselves to a place like this person, let's imagine, he discovers he's really pissed at Uncle Bob. But he feels really uncomfortable being angry. So he doesn't say that. But the more he thinks about Uncle Bob, um, and so he's now we came from an unconscious place. I don't know why I'm bothered, but I am. Now he knows what's bothering him. So he's now say, oh, in order for me to do what I want, I've got to resolve my anger with Uncle Bob. And so he's now created a much stronger foundation with which to take new action. And so in our model, this is where sustain is the going home, which again, we don't often pay enough attention to in coaching. Is this person prepared to go do what they said they want to do? And so I'm not interested in what are your 7 steps or what is one thing you'll do and what's important to you about that. And not only that, one of the many reasons we don't set goals in narrative coaching much at all, unless a client insists, is because the person who sets the goal is not the person who's going to be delivering on the goal because they will have changed by then. And I'm not interested in what you're going to do later because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to do it. Because there's nobody that's going to care about you any more than I do right now. And you're going to go back to the very conditions that you're trying to change to somehow be different. I said, we're going to do it now. So we create a lot of experiences and experiments in narrative coaching. Because I tell my clients, if you can't do it now, you're not going to do it later. So let's see how it is now. So you can try some things out. So we can let them experiment. And so this person in our hypothetical Uncle Bob story I say, so what do you want to say to Uncle Bob? And then, well, no, like, what do you really want to say to Uncle Bob? And so that just to feel that, not that I want him to say that to Uncle Bob, it's rude or it's mean or whatever, but to find, so that sits in you. That's part of who you are. If you deny that, it just festers and creates problems for you. So let's process what that's all about and find a healthier way for you to express this. None of this, of what I just said, would have been available to us in the first 10 minutes of the conversation. But that was the real point about why they came. I'm tired of being mad at Uncle Bob. I need to figure this out. Other questions for right now? I can move to another couple of other slides. Like, grab something from over here and help myself with this. Anything for now? Okay. So let me just share a couple more slides with you. So in terms of what it's like to be a narrative coach, and this will appeal to some of you, I think, quite a bit. Here we are again. All right. Okay. So I'll let you just read this. So one of the things we're going to invite you to do in the first couple of modules is put the damn rock down. The vast majority of what you might have been taught, you're not going to need most of the time. And what you are going to need, especially now, is courage and deep compassion and to feel like, even if you're not a cyclist, to feel more the freedom like the person on the right. And so we're not so much teaching you a coaching model, we're teaching you how to be a human who listens to stories and sees people in their telling of their stories. And so one of the ways we think about this, like I said, the model as it's normally sort of visualized, I don't think I put that in here, I didn't, but is more like a window pane. And so we're just observing where is this person on this journey that they're on and what might be helpful to them? What do they need most right now? So the way we think about that is sort of like a tugboat. We're not we're not coaching people like we're going to take them through our process. We're coming alongside them on a journey they're already on, engage them in natural human conversations to figure out how can I help them move towards what they want. And so a tugboat is tiny compared to a large ship that it's trying to push around, but it's built for purpose. And so that's some ways what we're doing as a narrative coach. We're just nudging people in the direction of what they seem to be heading for
Hey.
and helping them to scaffold themselves to be successful at that. And so these are just some of the principles of the work. Then we can talk a bit about the structure of the program. So if you forget all of this, even when you're coaching, if you remember the first one, you'll be far along. So we don't want you stuck in your head trying to think of the next brilliant question. We want you just to pay attention to what's actually happening in front of you and trust that everything you need is already right in front of you. All the material, so we mostly just work with the material and people's stories. We observe what's happening to us, to them, to the field, to the stories, to the characters in the stories, and know that everything we need is right there. Especially in the beginning, a lot of our times our clients come to us with issues around which they feel judged or ashamed or been labeled as problematic or got bad feedback. And so a lot of what we're doing in the beginning is just helping them be present to themselves. And we're doing that by modeling that for them, to be present to what is with them without any judgment. Everything is welcome. And then the paradox of this is that one would expect that in that presencing that we would then afterwards talk a lot. But in reality, my observation is narrative coaches talk much less than most coaches. And we borrow this famous phrase from a guy named Ram Dass, to speak only when we can improve on silence. And it's not as often as we think. And so we're letting the story kind of come into the room and see what it's trying to say to us and get us to pay attention to. The story's unfolding in real time, so we don't really know where it's going. Not even the client knows where it's going. And so we're just using the silence to let more things kind of come into the room. And in that, as more material becomes available to us, we're not trying to explain a lot of things or offer a lot of theory. We're just trying to generate experiences. And so one of the fun things I've done sometimes with leaders, for example, who are shorter than the average person. And they often feel self-conscious about that. We have a lot of stereotypes about leaders. And and so they want to have more presence or more authority. So one of the things I might get them to do is stand on top of a table and talk to me. For the first time in their life, they get to be tall. What does it feel like to be tall? Oh, it's great. You can see so much more, and I can look down on you. And so, not that they're going to be magically taller or being tall even matters as a leader, but it gives them access to a part of themselves they've never had before. And so we're doing that with all of the elements of the field, with chairs, with objects, with words, with metaphors, everything to kind of bring the story alive so they can feel it, they can sense it, they can see it. And for me, it's not only is it more powerful, but it's outside of themselves, so they don't have to defend it. They can look at it like with you, like, oh, that's really interesting. And then in the course of working with the narrative material, usually there's a choice that comes or a realization that comes that we think of as a threshold. I was here. I believe this about myself, going back to what Chad was saying. I had this view of myself, and now I'd like to learn how to come from a different place. And so we're going to help them to do that through the course of working. So as they're changing, their story is changing, and their capacity is changing. And now it gets interesting um, in terms of how do we help them bring that to life. So I'm going to stop there and just see if there's any questions about these last few slides about kind of how narrative coaches work. I know it's kind of a brief introduction, but anything that stands out for you about that? And then we can go into the logistics of the program or anything else that would be important to you. Other questions for now? Is this coming back to you, Susan? Is it resonating again?
This is so good. It's reminding me that it's all there still. I haven't forgotten this stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe if I can just really quickly share an
Yeah,
experience I
great.
had recently. I do a bit of disability support work as well as coaching. And I happened to be with my client when the OT came in to do some work with him. And I know for myself, I put a lot of, I feel like I'm not good enough sometimes because I don't know enough. But I have, yeah. Anyway, this OT came in and was super, has been in the field for 26 years, so knowledgeable, knew what to ask, like there was no referring to notes or anything, so knowledgeable. But I just went, could you just breathe? Could you just pause? Could you just ground yourself? There was just something stressful about being in her presence, and my client, and she was often getting it wrong. I know him and his story, and she was getting the wrong impression and taking him down on a journey that he didn't need to go on. And I just in that moment went, that's when I thought I think I'll come and sit on this
Okay.
session. I know how I could just see how much more valuable her work could be if she just pulled back, despite
Yeah.
all the amazing knowledge she had.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. But anybody else for now? Yes, Renee.
David, I just have a curiosity if in the next part of the session, whether we explore working with groups or teams or community. I don't know if you're going to talk a little bit about that. That is something that I'm holding in the back of my
Yeah.
mind about where I want to go with my coaching practice. So I don't know if
Yeah.
you're going to specifically speak to that today, but that's something I'm curious about.
Yeah, probably not. We have a little bit at the end of the program about that. One of the things we're building now and we'll do more of. So this will be the last year we run the program like this. Um, and we're going to move more towards a learning community that allows us to do two things. One, have way more opportunities to practice and get feedback to get better at this sooner. But two, have groups around special interests. So I've done narrative coaching. I don't call it narrative coaching because organizations don't often understand that. So I just say it's this, but and I model that for them. But we're going to create some special opportunities for looking at narrative coaching in certain applications. So there's a whole bunch of our graduates who work in healthcare. We have a number of people that are doing more work with groups and teams. It's too much for the average person because who doesn't work in that space, but we're going to create some special opportunities where we can come together with people that have the same interest and say, we've learned this about narrative coaching. Let's explore now how this would be different um, with teams. Um, and I'll give you a simple example of uh, working with a team in which the team, for a number of reasons, who work we were doing with them, was changing from kind of a functional model to kind of a more silo module with each of them. And they're going to work together as a collective team as opposed to just running your part of the business. And there was a woman that didn't want to do that. And they literally spent a year trying to convince her to join everybody else. And she said no. And the only reason they didn't fire her was because A, she had protection, but B, she was the best person in her business in the region. So that was, long story short, I met each of them ahead of time and say, in these debates you have with her, what role do you tend to play? And some tried to rescue her, some kept attacking her, say, hey, get on with it. And some were feeling sorry for her. I said, so when we get to this, so I'm like to come to your next meeting. And when you get to that meeting, I would like you not to do that and let me just have a few minutes with her. Do you agree? Yes. So we go in there, the topic comes up. Of course, everybody goes right to type immediately. And I said, time out. And I looked at them. I said, you just agreed like an hour ago not to do this. And so we had a laugh. And so I said, you have a story that you're locked in this conflict. You have a story about her. You have a story about yourself. You have a story about your roles. I'd like you to just put all those stories away. Like pull out your purse or your backpack. Just imagine you cramming all your stuff that you bought in into those and put it under the table. And we're going to start completely from scratch. So I turned to this woman who I knew. I'd been working with the organization for a while. I turned to her and I said, what is it you would like to do? She goes, I just don't want to be on this team. And so I said, I hear you. And what would make that possible for you? Well, I need to quit, but I need them to appreciate how much I've given, like for 30 years, and given to this organization. I need to be respected for my decision and appreciated for what I've done. So I turned to the team. Are you willing to give that to her? Of course, she's an amazing person, an amazing practitioner. And I turned back to this woman. I said, "Is there anything else you need?" And she goes, "No, I'm done." And she got up and left the meeting. In 7 minutes, they resolved an issue they'd spent a year arguing about because they're all trapped in their old story. The irony of the whole story was they hired her back on Monday as a contractor because what because when you get locked into a story, you put gigantic blinders on, right? For them, their only path was we have to convince her to join the team. And she kept saying, I don't want to be on the team. We're going to convince her to join the team. I don't want to be on the team. It's a never-ending loop. So we just take that out of the equation and say, we could start from a different story. How do we help everybody be successful? And really, all she wanted to do was be acknowledged for leaving. But she was the best person in her line of work. And so they hired her back and said, you don't have to be a leader of anything. You just have to be a mentor to all of your team members, which she loved because that's what she would, and to carry on with what you've done for your whole career. And and so then other people started saying, huh, I mean, I don't have to be trapped in this role. No, you don't either. And so it started this whole series over months of conversations of, we had this idea about this story about how we were supposed to be as a team. As they watched her be brave and go first, they also realized, I'm not really keen on this either. But they'd all kind of colluded to agree because they sort of felt that's what the director wanted. And so then we began they started interviewing each other. So what do you really want? What would make your life meaningful here at work? What needs to change about how we structure our organization? Because as the last thing I'll say about the story was, when many of them started, many of them had been there for quite some time. There were two languages spoken in the facility, English and Spanish. And this was now 10 years ago now, but so I'm sure it's even more. But at that time, there were 27 languages spoken by families, 25 of which nobody in the organization spoke. So their old leadership model did not work because they have to be sensitive to so much more now than they ever had to before. And so one of the things that, I guess the moral of the story for me is going back to where you started, Julia. It's easy to overcomplicate coaching. And most of what we do in narrative coaching is actually quite simple. We pay attention, we notice, we get curious, we help people reflect back to people what they're saying, and we help them figure out what about what you've just said feels important to you that we should spend some more time on. Um, and so everything is sort of emerging out of the conversation, not being driven by us as the coach. Yeah. How is that, Renee?
Thank you. That was so helpful, David. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And what part of the country are you on, if I might ask?
So I am on Wurundjeri country, which
Yeah.
is in Melbourne, Australia. And Susan, I absolutely resonate with you. I am an occupational therapist who feels like she doesn't belong because
Mm,
I'm always interested in people's stories.
yeah.
And so I see my profession in a way that I think, oh, this is but I work with a lot of community
Yeah.
and want to get change in healthcare. So I am
Sure.
thinking about this as a clinician, how it could help me, but
Yeah.
also thinking about how can we get change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what town would you be closest to?
So Melbourne, Australia, and
Yeah, I know Melbourne.
Nicholson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Are you?
I'm on the edge of the Yarra Valley.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Yeah, we would meet up there every year for our retreat with the participants. So, yeah, it's a lovely area.
Beautiful.
There's actually, if you email me later, I'll have to look it up. But there's actually a woman, a researcher, who's done a lot of work I just blanked. On physical therapy and things like that, and story. And she's also has the same job you have. Um, and so if you just email me, I'll send you a couple articles by her. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
yeah. Um, all right, let me just share with you about a little bit about what the program looks like, and then we'll see where to go from here. So this is kind of what we cover and what sort of the purpose of the program. Um, the program, you'll see this in just a minute, sort of covers three main areas about the work. And you'll have one of the beauties of the way the program is designed this year is will give you even more chance to practice than ever before in the program. So kind of lucky that way. Um, so there's 9 modules over 9 months. The average person spends maybe a day a month at the most in the program doing different things. The thing we're doing a lot differently is I've gone from teaching everything to teaching part of it, and now we've got two amazing graduates who've been working in the space for quite some time. They're both high-level coaches and supervisors, mentors, etc., are going to take over the sessions, which is actually better for you in some ways because they're closer to you on your journey and have spent a lot of time helping newer narrative coaches do this work. So what we'll do is I'm going to record the main material just like I would for you if I were here live. So you can watch that ahead of time and then show up at the first session in week one to actually explore that material with your faculty member and all the other students. And so rather than having to sit through the video, you can just take notes yourself and come with questions. And there'll be some exercises, some practices, and lots of spaces, particularly at the start of each module, to kind of get a basic sense of the material. We're going to then imagine this sort of as a funnel. Then the second, oh, there's a twos missing. Huh, interesting. Um, there are only, yeah, there. Anyways, I always like it when I surprise myself. I can't count. But there's this sort of funneling of going from the large group, from all the material to a large group to a small group of like three people, which is again a chance to like, what do you think they meant, and what are you understanding? And we'll have some assignments to practice, but it's a smaller group, a more intimate group, so it's easier to give feedback and get some help. And then you're going to go all the way down to yourself on the next week, which is a field work. It's an assignment to go do on your own to see what's sticking, what you're doing yourself. This is going to build confidence and give you opportunity to kind of claim it for yourself. And And then you'll come back at the very end of each module and kind of reflect and share kind of what you've done and what you've discovered. And that's all designed to help you integrate everything you've gained from the module so that you feel comfortable taking that forward um, in in your own practice. So each of the modules has that same structure, and there's sort of three sets of modules. The first one is all about how narrative coaches see the world and how we kind of use ourself as an instrument in coaching. And again, we look at a lot of our own presence, we look at the relationship, and we look at the field, the space that we're working in, all as a way to set the stage for narrative coaching itself. And it's really interesting because people that are really attached to more traditional modes of coaching would look at this and say, none of this is coaching. When's the coaching coming? This is actually well over half the work before they've even gotten to the topic or gotten to any kind of sense of where the client might be going. This is what makes, otherwise, for me, a lot of coaching feels like you go out and you spend a lot of money buying a very expensive bag of seeds, and you just wander down some random street and cast your seeds out, and then come back and look for vegetables. Narrative coaching is the exact opposite. It's just like an organic farm. We spend the first three modules preparing the soil, understanding how to make people feel welcome and safe, how to help them feel like they can trust us and trust themselves with their own stories, and so that whatever is going to come later that results in action has the soil to help it grow. The second band or set of three is all about the narrative coaching process. So we'll introduce the model and some things about the model. We're going to show you some things about how to use the process to help people learn and grow. And then we're going to start shifting to stories in particular. And this is where we move into what we think of as serious play. And we're going to show you a lot about how to work with metaphors, work with objects, work with characters. Um, and this is where it starts to get really fun in many ways. And then the last three are, now that you've got sort of the right approach, you've got experience of how the process works, we're going to focus on three specific skills. We're going to start with narrative listening and how we approach listening and what we listen for. We're going to show you how narrative coaches tend to inquire. Sort of hinted at that before, but it's a very different way of thinking about inquiry that we find quite powerful. And then lastly, how do you create structures so that people can be successful when they leave the coaching session? And then we come back at the very end for a celebration where we get to talk about kind of the journey you've been on and have you share some of your highlights for yourself. Yeah, and there's a bunch of things that come with it, just extra resources. You can get credit hours if that's important to you for your accreditations. We ask you to write a little portfolio for your certificate. Just as a record of kind of what you've done and what you're taking. Um, there's a forum where you can put your questions of each other. I come by and check the forum often. I can answer them as well. And then you also then get plugged into our network of a couple thousand graduates. So I'm just going to stop there and just ask if there's anything about the program itself or the experience itself that you'd like to ask about while we're on the call today.
David, I'm just wondering if you can remind me when it starts.
It starts in the at the I think on the 20th of March. So it starts in about 3 weeks or so. And yeah.
Thank you.
All the every session is offered twice a day for you in Australia. The PM session will be the best. That'll be your morning. Every session is recorded. All the live sessions are recorded. My slides will be recorded. So if you miss something, you can always watch the recording later. And we have a very attentive team. So if you run into snags, we can always help you with that. Yeah. Jessica, were you going to ask a question? Okay.
No.
All right. You all good? All right. You can you can register. Oh, there's Chad again. Out for his walk. You're getting a nice tour of your town there, Chad. Um, uh, so if you have any more questions, you're always welcome to reach out to us. I'll just put this back up for a second. Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I can just reach out to MI Connect and Steve will answer any of your logistical questions. And this is where you can, is where you can sign up for the class. Okay. But so I hope this has been helpful and hopefully that we'll see you in the program. It would be great.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome.
Yeah.
You all have a great day.
Thank you
too.
so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.